The atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945 brought an end to World War II. The policy of mutually assured destruction during the Cold War between the United States of America and the Soviet Union meant that if one country used nuclear weapons against the other, the reaction should be equal in force and faster. Available time. Over the course of the Cold War and perhaps several times after, citizens all over the world held their breaths for nuclear war between the world's superpowers. Hello guys, I am Mark from Amazing Videos TV. Today we will talk about 9 historical times a nuclear war nearly erupted while the world was heedless. To stay up to date with our future videos, please subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon so you get notified each time we post new videos. So, without any ado, let's dive into the video. October 5, 1960. The moon was mistakenly detected as a nuclear missile. Early warning radar is fast becoming one of the most important tools of the nuclear age. American radar stations were built around the world in the hope that they would detect incoming Soviet missiles, warning of a nuclear strike, and allowing the president to take appropriate response action. On October 5, 1960, a warning was issued from one of the newly built early warning radar stations at Thule, Greenland, now called Quannock. Reportedly, dozens of missiles have been discovered, and it is said that they will reach the United States in 20 minutes. Panic spreads at the headquarters of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, in Colorado, which is on the highest alert level. What reduced the panic at the time was that Soviet Prime Minister Nikita Khrushchev was on a visit to New York. Investigations later revealed that the early warning radar system had spotted the moon rising over Norway on the grounds that it was a Soviet nuclear missile. November 24, 1961. Single switch causes mechanical failure. Just over a year after the previous incident, Strategic Air Command, SAC in Omaha, Nebraska lost contact with the early warning radar station in Thule. Strategic Air Command officials tried to contact the North American Aerospace Defense Command headquarters in Colorado, but the line was broken. The probability that communications between Thule and North American Aerospace Defense Command would be interrupted by a technical failure had been set as too low, which led SAT to believe that an attack was underway against them. The entire warning force in the Strategic Air Command was ordered to prepare for takeoff, but the crisis ended when an American fighter managed to contact Thule, and it became clear that no attack had taken place. It was later revealed that a single switch had disabled all communications, even emergency hotlines between Strategic Air Command, Thule's radar system, and North American Aerospace Defense Command. October 25, 1962. A bear ignites the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis is perhaps the closest thing to a nuclear world war. 4 dangerous moments passed over the course of 13 days that nearly ignited the war, the first of which occurred on October 25, 1962. Tensions were already high during the crisis, and the U.S. military was put in DEFCON 3, 2 steps away from nuclear war. DEFCON 3 is a threat score on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 representing maximum reaction. Readiness score is accelerated reaction. Description: increased state of readiness of the armed forces, readiness of the Air Force to operate in about 15 minutes. Shortly after midnight on October 25, a guard at the Guiding Sector Center in Duluth, Minnesota saw someone trying to scale the fence around the facility. The guard was afraid that this person was a Soviet saboteur, so he shot the suspected intruder and then activated the sabotage alarm, which activated the air raid alerts that go off at all air bases in the region in such a case. Pilots panicked at Falk Field in neighboring Wisconsin, knowing that not all testing and maneuvers are taking place while the Army is in DEFCON 3. The pilots were pointed at their nuclear-armed F-106 guns and were walking down the runway when the alarm was determined to be false. They were stopped by a car traveling on the tarmac to tell the pilots to stop. It turns out that the intruder is just a bear. October 27, 1962. A Soviet submarine nearly fired a nuclear torpedo. It is said that this day is the most dangerous day in history, as there were 2 cases that almost caused a nuclear war. On the morning of October 27, the Soviets shot down a U-2F reconnaissance plane that was bombing Cuba, killing the pilot and thus escalating tensions between the 2 sides. Later, the Soviet submarine B-59 was spotted trying to break the blockade imposed by the U.S. Navy around Cuba. Meanwhile, the U.S. Beale dropped some of its deep-water training missiles on the surface of the submarine. Valentin Savitsky, commander of the B-59 submarines, believed that the latter was under attack and ordered a nuclear torpedo to be prepared to target the U.S. Randolph. All three senior officers on board the B-59 submarine agreed to launch the torpedo, except for Vasily Arkhipov, the second commander of the submarine, who persuaded the commander to wait for orders from Moscow. October 27, 1962, the U.S. Air Force sends two nuclear-armed fighters. On the same day, U.S. Air Force pilots nearly ignited World War III in the Bering Sea, which separates Alaska and Russia. A U.S. Air Force U-2 reconnaissance plane was on its way to the North Pole for an aerial test mission. The plane, intended for espionage missions, accidentally crossed Soviet airspace and then lost its position, spending about 90 minutes in the area before turning east to leave. Meanwhile, 6 MiG fighter jets were sent to shoot down the U-2 while it was crossing the Soviet border. The U.S. Strategic Air Command was afraid of losing another U-2, so it sent a Delta F-102 armed with Falcon air-to-air missiles. Fortunately, the F-102 did not encounter the MiGs and escorted the U-2 to Alaska. October 28, 1962. Radar operators are confused by an unknown satellite. A day after these events, radar operators in Morristown, New Jersey, the headquarters of North American Aerospace Defense Command, reported shortly before 9 a.m. that Soviet nuclear missiles were on their way to America and were expected to strike at 9:02 near the city of Tampa, Florida. All personnel at North American Aerospace Defense Command were alerted to respond, but the scheduled time passed without any detonation, causing the reaction to be delayed. It later emerged that the radar operators at Morristown were confused because the facility was running a test tape simulating a missile launch from Cuba, when an unknown satellite unexpectedly appeared on the horizon. The additional radars were not operational at the time, and Morristown's operators were not informed that the satellite was intended for logistical support within the United States because the facility that used to handle such operations was occupied with other work in Cuba. November 9, 1979. Training almost became reality. At 3 a.m. on November 9, 1979, computers at the headquarters of the North American Aerospace Defense Command reported warnings of thousands of nuclear missiles being launched from Soviet submarines aimed at the United States. Strategic Air Command was immediately alerted, and the American missile crews were on the highest alert level possible, while the nuclear missiles were ready for takeoff. The National Emergency Airborne Command, the plane that was supposed to carry the president during a nuclear attack to ensure he had control of the nuclear arsenal, had taken off, even though President Jimmy Carter was not on board. National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski knew the president would take 3 to 7 minutes to decide, so he decided to tell Carter that it was a real threat. 6 minutes of intense anxiety passed, and satellites confirmed that no attack had occurred. It was later discovered that a technician had inadvertently inserted a training tape simulating such a scenario into a computer. September 26, 1983, a Soviet colonel takes the biggest gamble in history. After midnight on September 26, 1983, Soviet satellite operators at the Serpukhov bunker, south of Moscow, received a warning of a U.S. nuclear missile launch from the Minutemen. Before being detected 4 more missiles. The atmosphere was tense between the United States and the Soviet Union earlier this month, when the Soviets shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007 near Sakhalin Island, killing all 269 people on board, including U.S. Congressman Larry McDonald. The commanding officer of the bunker, Stanislav Petrov, had to inform his superiors of the launches to provide an adequate response. Soviet policy at the time called for a comprehensive retaliatory strike. Despite this, Petrov decided not to inform his superiors. He guessed that if the United States were to strike the Soviet Union with nuclear weapons, they would send hundreds of missiles, not just 5. But Petrov had no way of knowing what the situation really was before enough time had passed, by which time the nuclear bombs could reach their targets, making his decision the biggest gamble in human history. After 23 minutes, Petrov's theory was confirmed. It was a false alarm. It was later discovered that a Soviet satellite missed sunlight, reflecting the tops of the clouds like rockets. January 25, 1995, nuclear fears after the collapse of the Soviet Union. 4 years after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the first president of the Russian Federation, Boris Yeltsin, nearly launched a nuclear war. A Russian early warning radar revealed the launch of a missile with characteristics like the Trident missile, which was launched by a submarine off the coast of Norway. The discovered rocket was a Norwegian scientific rocket sent on a mission to study the aurora borealis. Norwegian authorities had informed the Kremlin of the launch, but the radar operators were not informed. Yeltsin was given the Chekit, the Russian version of the nuclear briefcase, sometimes known as the football, and launch codes for Russia's missile arsenal. Russian submarines were also put on alert. Fortunately, Yeltsin's belief that it was a false alarm proved correct, and Russian satellites confirmed that there was no activity from US missile sites. Okay guys, thank you for watching the video. Do you expect the outbreak of a third world war soon? Let us know in the comments section, and please share the video and subscribe our channel. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video.